Hi, welcome back to my channel, Beautiful Minutia. If you're new here, my name is Tiffany, and today I wanted to talk about the 8 nonfiction books that I am planning to read in 2022. If you saw my 2022 reading goals video, if you haven't, I'll go ahead and link it so that way you can watch it. But one of my goals was to read more nonfiction next year. I set a goal of 8 books because 8 seems really achievable. You know, that's less than one a month. And I'm not a very big nonfiction reader. I read quite a bit of like spiritual nonfiction, but that's kind of the extent of what I've read. But in Nonfiction November in 2021, I actually started reading some not spiritual nonfiction and was really kind of surprised at how much I enjoyed them. And so I kind of want to keep that momentum rolling. So I have here 8 books. Some of them are tiny, some of them are not. Some of them are biographies, some are autobiographies, some are just like historical nonfiction, and then it's just a random assortment of books. So we'll go ahead and dive in. So the first book on this list actually is spiritual, but it's a biography, and that's God's Smuggler. This is about Brother Andrew. I'm actually not sure when Brother Andrew lived, but basically he worked on smuggling Bibles into countries where Bibles were not allowed, and that's kind of like what his story is about. But I have heard excellent things about this book from so many people, so I've wanted to read it for years, so I'm excited to get to this one this year. Next up is a historical nonfiction, and that's Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee. I've had this book for a little while. It is actually like required reading for my daughter in high school years. We are homeschoolers, in case you didn't know that. And so the curriculum that we use is very literature based, and I've been picking books up as I find them for good prices, so that way it's not like a massive burden to buy books every year. So this is one of the ones that's required for high school, and obviously this is about Native Americans and just like the way that they have been mistreated and driven off their land. So I know that this will be a very heavy one to read, and it will be very sad, but I'm really looking forward to reading it. At the same time, I think it will be super informative and very impactful in my life. So it's interesting because the author uses like autobiographies and like Native American council notes and firsthand accounts and stuff of all kinds of information to back this. So I am really looking forward to reading this one. Next up is something totally different. I actually don't know how this is classified. I'm gonna see if the front says, because I'm not really sure. I don't know. I guess it's like a travel book. Oh, the sun. I'm glowing now. And that's A Walk in the Woods by Bill Bryson. I picked this one up recently, but I have wanted to read this one for a while. And it was actually one I was hoping to read at some point in 2021 because I wanted to work on the Literary Life Podcast's challenge for 2021, which I did not do. Failed miserably, but you know what? I also didn't post on YouTube, so I didn't have the same accountability that I have when I post TBRs on YouTube. I feel like everyone knows that I'm supposed to be doing it, and I didn't share any of my picks for the Literary Life podcast. So that's part of the reason. Also, I just wasn't motivated. Anyways, this is about like hiking, and but it's supposed to be really funny too. So I've heard really good things about Bill Bryson's writing. So I'm looking forward to reading this one, and it's very different than everything else on my list. Next up is another heavy book, and that's 12 Years a Slave. So this is about a man. I'm pretty sure this is actually like a autobiography of him, and he was a free black man in the North, and then he gets like taken to the South and is a slave for 12 years. I'm sure this is one a lot of you have heard about, even if you haven't read it, because there was a movie made of it in recent years. So it has quite a bit of notoriety for that reason, but I really, really want to read this one. I've not seen the movie, so I don't really know anything about the story at all other than just like the generalized information. Next up is one I was hoping to get to in Nonfiction November, and it was part of like my poll because I asked you guys to help me choose one, and this one was like right up there. It was not quite like the top. I had two that were tied for first place, and that was Just Mercy and In Cold Blood, and this book was third, and it's Isaac Storm by Erik Larson. I have not read any Erik Larson yet, and I really want to read The Devil in the White City because that's the one that intrigues me the most, but I picked this up at a library book sale for 10 cents, and so I really wanted to read this one. Christy Lewis from Dostoevsky in Space loves this book, and I'm really interested to read it. It is about the hurricane that swept through Galveston in 1900. I actually do know a little bit about this because we have family members who live in Galveston, and a couple of years ago we went down there on like vacation and stayed with them, and we toured like all the historical stuff. So I do know a bit about the Galveston hurricane and flooding that happened that killed thousands of people. I think it is quite possibly the most deadly storm in the United States because they were very unprepared for it. And I think Isaac was the meteorologist, and so he should have known that it was going to be more severe than he did. So I think that this will be really interesting. I've heard really good things about Erik Larson's writing style. Next up is one I really had to put on here because I just read Just Mercy recently and really, really loved it. And everyone told me that if I love Just Mercy, I really need to read The Sun Does Shine. So this is by Anthony Ray Hinton, and he was someone who was represented by Brian Stevenson, who wrote Just Mercy. He is mentioned in Just Mercy, but he's not the main narrative that we're following, the main case that we're following. That's the Walter McMillan case. So this is a different case, but he is referenced in Just Mercy. And so he is a Black man who was wrongfully imprisoned and put on death row, and this is just his story. So I'm really excited to read this one. Everyone tells me it's super good and that I would really love it. Would this be a TBR of mine if it didn't have something Russian on it? Probably not. Next up is The Romanov Sisters by Helen Rappaport. I have heard excellent things about this book, and I'm just fascinated with Russian history in general, and so obviously it's kind of obvious what this book is about. I don't really know if this is like the best starting place when learning about the Romanovs and the revolution and the overthrow and everything. I've heard great things about, I think it's Robert K. Massey's books. He had like Peter the Great, and then he had one about the Romanovs or something too. I don't know. This book just looked really excellent, and I've heard really good things about it. So I had picked this up from, I think, Better World Books, actually. So I'm really looking forward to reading it. It is one of the bigger ones on the list, but I think as long as the writing style is not super dry, that will not be an issue for me. I think if it's really dry, then I'm gonna have a hard time. I saved the chunkiest for the last. This book is over 800 pages, so I'm sure it's going to take me multiple months to read this one, probably 3 or 4. I wouldn't be surprised if it takes that long, because I just don't fly through nonfiction like I do fiction. Fiction's easier and quicker to read. Nonfiction takes more mental effort, I think, because I really actually want to learn from it. It's not just for entertainment value. But anyways, that book is Washington Alive by Ron Chernow. I hauled this book recently and gave it to my husband. It was supposed to be a Christmas present, but I was really excited, so I gave it to him early. So he's been reading it for a little while, and he is not super far into it. He's not a really fast reader. He's like 70 something pages into it. So he's not a very fast reader. And then also he is a full-time pastor and going to college online and stuff, so he has a lot to do. But I'm hopeful that he will finish this book before I want to read it, but I'm going to plan to read it in the second half of the year to give him a little bit more extra time to work on it. But I have heard this is an excellent biography about Washington. This was one of Christy Lewis's favorite books from 2021, I believe. So I guess this is really evidence of how much Christy influences me because there's several books that she recommended for me on here. I'm looking forward to reading this. I'm I'm a little nervous about it because it's so big, but I know even if it's kind of dense in information, I know I like Ron Chernow's writing style because I did start reading his book on Alexander Hamilton, which is actually the book that Lin-Manuel Miranda read, and then he wrote the Hamilton musical. So that was kind of the draw and why I had picked up the Hamilton book, but I had to wait months to get it in at my library. And then I only had it for like 2 or 3 weeks, and I did not finish that in that time period. I think I got a quarter of the way through it, but every time I picked it up, it was really fascinating and very engagingly written. So I don't think I'm going to have that hard of a time with this book. I think it's going to be very interesting. It's just going to be like a matter of like making myself get over the intimidation factor. All right, so there you have it. This is my collection of books. It's pretty eclectic. I did not want to go with like one time period of history and kind of get burnt out in that. So a lot of this is historical nonfiction because that's really what I was interested in reading more of. But like I said, I have a travel book in here and a couple biographies that aren't necessarily like super historical. And The Sun Does Shine is like a memoir, I think. But I'm kind of all over the place, you know. I've got Revolutionary War time period, I've got Civil War time period, I've got the Native American book. I don't know exactly what years that spans, and then I also have this Romanov book. So there's a lot here. So I'm really looking forward to reading these and diving into them, but I'm also like a little intimidated by some of them. So I'd love to hear from you in the comments down below if you have read any of these, what you thought, and also if you have any nonfiction goals or the type of nonfiction that you like to read. If you do, I have always been someone who read more for escapism and entertainment than anything else. So for me to be intentionally reading something to educate myself is not something that I've normally done. My husband is like that. His number one thing that he reads is historical nonfiction. So this is a little new to me. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please hit like and also subscribe so you can continue to see more bookish content from me. And I will see you again next time.